Okay, so good morning and thank you for joining us for Bell Let's Talk Day. My name is Micah and I work with PSP Health Promotion Team and I'll be the moderator for today's event. Bienvenue à la journée Bell Cause pour la cause. Mon nom est Micah et je serai la modératrice pour l'événement aujourd'hui. Before we begin with today's speakers, there's a few housekeeping points to go over. Make sure all your cameras and microphones stay off. The session is going to be recorded and will be available on ASIMS under the Mission Ready page to be viewed at a later time. Also, it will be available on 5CDSG Teams under the general channel. Assurez-vous d'avoir vos microphones et vos caméras éteints pendant les présentations. La session de ce matin sera enregistrée et sera disponible sur ASIMS et sur Teams. We'll now hear from the base commander, Colonel Parsons, and Sergeant Major C.W. O'Kane.
Good morning, folks. Before I give my opening remarks, I'll simply turn it over to Chief Warrant Officer Kane and ask him to give his.
Good morning, folks. Just a couple of quick points. So this shouldn't be predominantly about one day. We take one day and we focus on it, but this is something that should be happening every day of the year, quite frankly. Mental health affects everybody in some way, shape, or form at some point in their life, be it a family member or the individual themselves. And I just want to say, at the end of it all, you need to speak up. You need to ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and don't think that people are judging you. Everybody at some point in their life, myself included, needs to take a knee and sort some stuff out. And it's nothing to be ashamed about. Your bosses, be it military or civilian, are willing to help and know where to go to seek help. We all work for somebody at the end of the day. The last point I'll leave you with is we also have a Padre network, which is intimately tied into the RSM network. There is no limit to the amount of support that is out there, and I would encourage all of you to use it as you see fit. We're in some difficult times. There's lots of challenges. We're short-staffed. We're at a very awkward time of the year after Christmas. Folks now are starting to get cabin fever. So now more than ever, we need to watch our folks. People are getting frustrated with COVID. And the list goes on. So please, as you go about your business, take a minute and ask folks how they're doing. You will be surprised at the impact it'll have. That's all I got, sir.
Thanks, Sir Major. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. C'est un plaisir et un privilège pour moi de vous souhaiter la bienvenue à notre événement aujourd'hui qui a pour but de souligner la journée belle Cause pour la cause. It is my deep and personal privilege to open Bell Let's Talk Day with you all today. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we live, work, and gather virtually today is a traditional unceded territory of and is considered sacred by the Wolastoqey people. I would like to pay respect to their elders and recognize the resilience of Indigenous peoples on this land. 1 in 5 Canadians will experience a form of mental illness at some point in their life. Even if you have not experienced mental illness, chances are someone close to you has or will have a mental illness at some point in their life. About 17% of regular force personnel receive health services for mental health in a year. About 15% of regular force personnel perceive the need for mental health care, but do not receive it. 15%. The most common reasons for not receiving needed mental health, they manage the problem alone. Afraid of repercussions of the military career and afraid to ask for help. These reasons continue to highlight the stigma associated with mental health. This is why we are here today. Bell Let's Talk Day reminds us that talking is the best way to start breaking down the stigma associated with mental illness. We have some great local speakers lined up this morning. Warrant Officer Joe George, Lieutenant Colonel Dale Childs, and Diana Brown. The theme of this year's event is when it comes to mental health, now more than ever, every action counts. The COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in a high degree of uncertainty and disruption to our lives. As we continue to navigate through these uncertain times and physical isolation, it's more important than ever to stay connected, either virtually or in ways that respect COVID-19 public health measures. Whether you are checking in on a coworker, friend, or family after the talk today, helping someone who is struggling with an addiction, like Warrant Officer Joe George, being a mental health champion and leader, like Lieutenant Colonel Childs, looking after mental health patients like Diana Brown, no matter how small you think that action is, it counts. Merci à tous d'être ici aujourd'hui. Je vous souhaite un matin éducatif et inspirant. Thank you all for being here today. I wish you an educational and inspiring morning. And if I can leave you with one simple thing, mental health is no joke. The resources are there. Use them. Reach out. Talk. Discuss. Now is not the time to try to do this on your own. Now is not the time. Bye, thanks, and have a great day.
Thank you very much, Colonel Parsons and Chief Warrant Officer Kane. So just a reminder for everyone to stay muted and turn off your cameras, just so that we can leave the floor open for the speakers. So following the presentations, there will be an opportunity for the audience members to ask questions to our speakers. As the presentations are happening, feel free to write the questions in the chat box. And I, as well as other health promotion team members, will be taking notes of the questions, and they will be answered during a question session at the end. Après les présentations, nous aurons une session de questions. Si vous préférez demander vos questions en français, s'il vous plaît, n'hésitez pas. Il sera mon plaisir de traduire pour vous. Also note that Bell will be donating 5 cents to Mental Health Initiative for every text, mobile call, long distance call, tweet using the hashtag Bell Let's Talk or Facebook Bell Let's Talk frame or Snapchat filter. So let's get started with our first presentation for today. Warrant Officer Joe George is currently employed as a platoon warrant officer at the Transition Center in Gagetown. He's had a lifelong addiction with alcohol and has been sober for almost 23 years now. Once sober and due to life events, he has turned the negativity of his addiction to a positive and acted as a champion for addiction and mental health awareness. He currently assists PSP Health Promotion as an instructor for the course Alcohol, Other Drugs, Gambling, and Gaming Awareness course for supervisors. In the civilian population, he works with children with special needs, such as scoliosis and autism. In conjunction with his wife, their company, they have donated scuba courses to both active and retired military suffering from PTSD. So we'll give the floor to George now.
Hi, thanks very much. Just to be sure, am I on now?
You're good, Joe.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so my name's Joe George. I am a warrant officer in the Canadian Forces, and I really appreciate being asked to come. So I'd like to thank Health Promotions for inviting me back to speak. It really means a lot, to get asked back a second time, and it's very different doing it virtually. However, this time I shouldn't get in trouble for not wearing pants, so it's a little better that way. So I do joke around a lot, and I fully acknowledge what Colonel Parsons said. It's not a laughing matter. I do joke around when I'm talking, But don't make a mistake for me not caring, is what I'd ask. This is one of the most important topics in my life, but I need to joke in order to stop myself from fainting. Okay, so we're gonna carry on, and we'll start with my talk, all right? And I'd just like you to think back in your life, and who remembers their last drink? Maybe it was last night, maybe a couple of days ago, maybe longer. The burn of the shot going down your throat, or the cold and the fizziness of the beer, and the taste, you know, that taste in your mouth. So I still do too. I remember it like it was yesterday. I miss the taste and the feeling that I got when I drank. And it still is with me every day. I also remember the next day after my last drink. So the day after my last drink, and I remember having a cold barrel of a shotgun in my mouth, the metallic taste of the little pellet, the foresight in the roof of my mouth. And I remember trying to reach the trigger with my foot. That's my last memory. I can still taste the metal and feel the dent from the foresight in the roof of my mouth. That's where my drinking took me by the end, and that's where it ended. I'm now very grateful that I reached out for help. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do. I began the long road to recovery, and luckily I didn't pull that trigger. And every day I think, luckily I didn't pull that trigger. I've been sober now for almost 23 years. That is something I never thought I would be able to do. It never occurred to me that I could stay sober for 24 hours. So almost 23 years is quite an accomplishment for me. When it began, it felt a lot different though. I remember being back in the back of my grandfather's garage. He had the car part in the front, and in the back there was a workshop where he used to do stuff. And then beside the door that went out to the pool, there was a beer fridge. I was about 7 years old, I think, and my Uncle Normie and I were in the back. He opened a bottle of beer, and chugged a bunch of it and then gave it to me. I remember drinking a good swallow, and I didn't want to be outdone by my uncle, then giving it back. We did that about 4 times until the beer was gone. And that was it, one beer, but it made me feel so good. I remember that dizziness in my head, the feeling of happy, the fun, and the feeling of disobedience, you know, the rebellion. It was awesome. So from there, I started drinking. So not a lot, just a bit, but I was 8 years old. I remember graduating from my grade 8 class in Ontario, where I was from. That's when we switched from grade school to high school. I was 12 or 13 years old. My buddy James and I had a sleepover to celebrate, and we stayed out in my dad's camper in the driveway. I had snuck in a bottle of whiskey and a bottle of cherry whiskey. James and I spent a good part of the night after my parents were sleeping, drinking. We drank a good amount of both bottles, enough that we should have both had alcohol poisoning. What I didn't really know, and I look back now and I realize it, is James was smart enough not to drink. I was doing most of the drinking, so he may have had a shot or two, but he was smart enough even back then that he knew that this wasn't a good thing to do. My dad was watching us, and when he heard the noise, he came out to see what was going on, and he caught us, and he caught me drunk. He brought us both into the house where he could get a hold of James's mother and father, and I decided that there was only one solution to the situation. So I told James we needed to run away. We ran away, and when they weren't looking, and we made it to the back of our grade school, which was quite far. It was across town. We climbed the fence and we kept going. We made it way back to the railroad tracks. On the way, just before the tracks, there's a huge ditch. I fell into the ditch, and you know, I got soaked. I went underwater, and James pulled me out and stopped me from drowning. We got onto the tracks and we started walking down the tracks, not knowing where we were going, knowing we needed to get away. Again, this was my recollection, so I want to make that clear. I think back now, and I believe that these were all my thoughts, and I believe James was only beside me because he felt a duty to make sure I didn't kill myself on the track. I blacked out. This was to be my first of many blackouts. I woke up in James's parents' bathtub. They were warming me from my hypothermia and waiting for my parents to come and get me. Little did I know it had been about 4 hours. So it had been about 4 hours from the time my parents caught me my dad caught me in the trailer to the time we ended up back at James's parents, and I was in the tub. Present at the tub were James's parents, and the Ontario Provincial Police. Again, this was my first blackout drunk and my first problem with the law, and it was to be the first of many. I'm not going to go through every story. I just wanted to highlight this was my first drunk. So I was 12 years old, like maybe 13. I think I was 12 years old in grade 8, and that's where it started. From there, my drinking got worse and worse. This went on through high school, where I switched schools to be with the better partiers. I went to a Catholic school at first, St. Anne's. And they said the better partiers were at Bell River High School. So I went there, public high school, and I got into more drugs and more drinking. In grade 11, I decided school wasn't for me. People there were too worried about how much I drank and not worried enough about their futures. I drank, I was worried about my future. So I was a man that had some conviction, and I was worried about my future. So these people were just kids to me. They worried about little things like my drinking. I began an apprenticeship as an automotive mechanic, and I worked as a mechanic for years as a licensed mechanic. These people could drink. Everywhere I went, I drank and drove. It was just the normal thing for me. I don't remember very often that I would leave without a beer, or a 26 or a Jack Daniels was another big thing. I remember towards the end, I used to make a joke about it. I would take the cap off the 26er and throw it out the window, and I'd say, I won't be needing that again. And it was a joke, but I was very scared at the time. I've had several accidents. I've wrecked several vehicles. I've had several close calls with my life. I was able to talk myself out of trouble several times. I never really ended up in that place where I was in jail. Just trying to think, but I don't think I did. And I never ended up in horrible trouble in the military. Back when I grew up, it was way easier to talk your way out of being drunk at work than it was to say that you had quit drinking at work. Anyway, some of the mechanics I worked with started telling me that I drank too much. And these were mechanics. I decided they were babies, and I began an apprenticeship as a millwright as well. I also began an apprenticeship as a truck mechanic at the same time. So having an addictive personality, I don't know if Gail's on here, but she hates when I say that, but having an addictive personality has its advantages. You're able to totally inundate yourself and get so crazy immersed in work. You can get almost addicted to work, and you can get a lot done, until you burn out. So you can see where one apprenticeship wasn't enough. I had to do 3 apprenticeships, 2 at the same time. So I did automotive mechanic, truck and coach mechanic, and construction millwright. And I did truck and coach and construction at the same time. The millwrights could drink. I remember buying my way into the union, getting the business agent that was the head of the union back then, getting him drunk and bringing him a bottle of whiskey to kind of, christen my way into the union. This was awesome. I felt like I found a home. Things revolved around drinking. As for being a truck mechanic, I remember in the early days when I was going to school, I was at Fanshawe College in London, Ontario, sleeping in my car under a train bridge in January, waking up the next morning and going right to school in the same smelly clothes. Sometimes I had peed in them. Sometimes I had at least spent the night in them. It's several times. This wasn't a one-off, and just degrading. And again, I was not quite 20 yet, so I was legal drinking age barely by this time. So that's a heck of a start to life there. The Millwrights started bugging me then that I was drinking too much, and they started nitpicking on little things. A couple of them caught me sleeping one time at a stoplight on the way home from work. They woke me up and brought me and my car home, and I decided they were going to start being babies too, so it was time to make a change in my life. If anybody knows anything about addictions, what I tended to do was a geographical cure. So I would move around a lot to places where people didn't know me, so that I could, restart my life. The only thing is, every time I went with me. So I was working at a car dealer out in Leamington, Ontario, right near Point Peely, and the first Gulf War started. So it was 1990, and it was Desert Shield had started. And I decided right then and there that I was going to go to war. So I'm sure soldiers could drink a lot. So I went to war. I joined up the next day, and by the time I was out of Cornwallis, the war was done. But man, did I find a home. These people could drink. So I embraced the military for the drinking culture. I was already a mechanic, so they told me I should be a vehicle tech, and that's what I did. When I started to learn about the military, what they did, who drank the most, I decided I should have been an engineer. So they seemed to be the hardest chargers with all the mines, explosives, booze, jumping, everything like that. I was a civilian diver, and there's military combat divers, there's so engineer divers and things like that. So I decided that's what I should have did. In order to do that, after coming in as a vehicle tech, I had to get out and get back in to become an engineer. So I did that. I got out for a while, moved to Calgary, wrecked that. And then I got back in as an engineer. I was posted to Petawawa, where I started jumping and all the cool stuff that came along with the engineers. I kept drinking, and I was loving the job. I got married to my first wife in about 1996, and we had 2 kids. Trevor was from her previous marriage. He's going to be 30 this year. And Samantha at the time, who's going to be 24 this year. In 98, my drinking was getting so bad that I was losing my family. Even the Army thought I drank too much. What the hell? Everyone I met was just big babies. So I decided, well, maybe I have a problem. I had actually dabbled in AA before that, Alcoholics Anonymous before that a few times, but I got cured. I realized that, I went a couple of days without a beer or without a drink, and realized I'm probably not an alcoholic. I just started off, and most people that I know drink as much as me. And that was true. Most people did, because I made a point of hanging out with people that drank as much as me, so that I didn't feel like I was an alcoholic. Before that, my experience had been that if you wake up in a ditch and showed up at work still drunk, they would give you an extra. If you said you had a drinking problem and needed to quit drinking, you would be blacklisted, and you would never get off that list. That was my experience, and that was at a time where it's different than it is now. The stigma at the time, again, is my experience. The stigma at the time was so bad that it was just better to drink. I had finally had it. I was losing everything. I tried to quit a few times, but I just couldn't do it. I was afraid I was going to die, and I wanted to die at that time. I figured if I died, everybody'd be better off. But I kept finding reasons to live, and that was important. Some of those were people. people like us, hopefully, that after we leave after today, we can be people that give other people reasons to live. In '98, my father was retiring. I think he'd been a school teacher for about 100 years, I think. I was deploying to Bosnia, so my wife, kids, and I went to my parents for the retirement party and to say goodbye while I went off to Bosnia. We live near Windsor, Ontario, so I went with my dad over to Detroit. We bought about 30 cases of beer for his party. My wife said I had to make a choice at that time. She said, I either choose my family or my booze. I told her how stupid she was for thinking this. Of course I wanted my family. How dare she think that anything was more important than my family? What I didn't realize was that it was no longer my choice. I had it headed so far down the road that the alcohol and the alcoholic in me started making the decisions, and I didn't have any choice anymore. I told her that if she got me the near beer, the 0.5% alcohol beer, and kept me in that, I would never drink again. I would never drink that real stuff again. She was relieved. She was giving me a chance, and she bought me about 4 12-packs for the party. The retirement party started, and I quickly drank all that near beer, so I was out. Then I blamed her for letting me run out and not even caring enough about my sobriety to keep me sober, and I started drinking. That night, I drank everything I could. I was drunk by supper. I don't remember much at all, just that we were leaving in the morning and we were going back to Petawawa. I woke up very early. I woke up to a beautiful day. I know it was a beautiful day because I was outside in my dad's front yard naked, face down in the dirt and grass with puke all over me. I had failed and I had it. I got dressed. I think it was about 6:30. It was foggy, but my mind was foggy. It was a beautiful day. But I think it was about 6:30. I went into my dad's garage and I was just sick and tired. I got his shotgun. I loaded the gun and I sat down on the carpet in the garage. I wanted to kill myself and I didn't want anyone to stop me. I spent from that time until about 7:30 trying to pull the trigger. The barrel was in my mouth. I had both hands around the barrel and I was bawling my eyes out and I was trying to pull the trigger with my big toe. I couldn't do it. I took the gun out of my mouth about an hour later and I unloaded it. I put it away and I called my uncle. This was a different uncle who had been sober for years by then. I think he had been sober for about 10 years. I went to my first of my sober life AA meetings. So this was my real first meeting. I told my wife that I was done and I couldn't understand how she didn't believe me, but it didn't matter. At that time, I had hit my bottom. So a lot of people ask what the bottom is. How do you know you hit your rock bottom, or what the bottom is? I know there's probably a lot of clinical people out there. There's a clinical definition out there. There's a ton of people smarter than me that could define it, word for word out of Webster's. I don't know that definition. The definition for me was very simple. The pain of getting better had to become less than the pain of staying where I was. And that's how I defined my bottom, or that's what the definition of bottom means to me. The pain of getting better had to become less than the pain of staying where I'm at. I went to another meeting in Petawawa and they told me that I just had to keep going to meetings, get a sponsor, and don't drink. I told them they were idiots and they didn't understand. I was leaving for Bosnia in a week and there were no meetings there. A woman spoke up and said her husband was going too. He had 12 years in the program. Maybe we could have a meeting together. I said, yeah, sure. Thinking there's about 2,000 troops there in about 4 different bases. I am sure I won't ever see this guy. I was doomed. She gave me his name. I worked with the guy. I had known him for years. He had never told me he was an alcoholic because back then you would be shunned. He worked in our RQMS. I remember thinking, I might be able to do this. I had a rough tour over there. I was electrocuted, and I had a very hard time, but I stayed sober through it all. I often say PT helps me stay sober. So I would go outside and sit on a picnic table and smoke and watch others do PT and not drink. I remember thinking 2 weeks ago, I had a gun in, so when I was over there, I remember thinking 2 weeks ago, I had a gun in my mouth with a round chamber, and now they gave me 5 full mags. But I made it through. I got back and I started healing. I thought I could heal my family and my wife, but that just wasn't meant to be. Later on that year, I had a parachute malfunction and made it out okay. But I decided I needed to change the scenery, so I got out of the military for a while. My first marriage ended. I stayed sober though. I started actually living my life. I made a point of doing all the things that I always wanted to do, all the bucket list stuff. I failed a lot. I made a lot of bad decisions, wasted a lot of money, and failed at a lot of things, but I did everything that I ever wanted to do. I've been sober since. It's not been easy. As a matter of fact, I still today, sometimes when I'm out cutting the grass or out welding on a hot summer day, I think I sure could use a cold beer. I catch myself now, and that's the difference. I'm hooked on soda water, bubbly water, and soda water. They're my drinks of choice. So it's a lot better now. Since then, I've started helping out a bit on base. I think I'm helping out. I think they tell me I'm helping out, but they've let me hang out and drink all their free coffee. So I do teach AODGA, so alcohol, other drugs, gambling, and gaming. I teach the respect in the Canadian Armed Forces with them. And I act as a champion of sorts for mental health and addictions, working with addicts and helping people clean up on base. So it's actually very rewarding. I do this as in a selfish act, I guess, as a selfish act. It's so that I can help people with similar problems in order to help myself feel better. But it gives me peace. I have been out of the military working all over the world as a commercial diver, and I got back in. So when I did have the parachute malfunction, I got out, I went back to Windsor, went and worked in the Gulf of Mexico and overseas as a commercial diver, but I got back into the military. There is still a very strong stigma in the military towards alcohol abuse. I find for the most part, people pay lip service to it, but when it comes down to helping people, we don't understand enough, so we don't help in any way that is doing what is best for the individual. We try to do what we think should be best, maybe what the textbook is, but it ends up not being the help that's needed for the individual. And I'd really like to qualify that. I'm getting low on time. I promised everybody I wouldn't go over time. I'd like to qualify that. The leadership now is so at the base commander, the level there is amazing. A lot different help than the leadership at the lower levels. So I just like to qualify that statement. But at our middle leadership level, we're still missing the mark. I think we still need to learn. So I've learned, at least in my lifetime, we will never get rid of all the stigma, but we can all take actions to reduce it. I have tried to reduce the stigma by being a helper to those with addictions. The worst part is you never know if you're successful. The ones that stay clean tend to drift away, maybe staying clean, maybe using again. You sometimes only know if you've failed. They either come back and want to get clean again, or they end up worse, taking their own lives or dying with the disease. I too have had other brushes with suicide. When my life got low due to work, bullying in the workplace and toxic work environments, I got back down to that same road, clean. So I was sober and clean, and I ended up at the same place. At one low point, I was actually on my way to kill myself. And I had a person, an officer who I knew, say, "How are you doing, Joe?" And I said, fine, sir. And I was actually walking with a hidden rope to hang myself in the showers at Petersville. He stopped me. He grabbed me, or, stopped me on the arm there. And he said, you don't look so good, really. How are you? And we talked for a bit, maybe 15 minutes, maybe not even 15 minutes. He never knew what was going on. He never knew what I was going to do. He just showed a bit of compassion. He saved my life that day. Just a little compassion and an honest, how are you doing, saved my life that day. I finally told him a bunch of years later, it was about 2 years ago, I finally got to tell him. The reason I bring that up is because lives may not be saved by profound acts. You don't always see the hero wearing a cape and looking good in those tights. Lives can be saved by just saying hi to someone and caring how they are. Just a smile and a kind word saved my life that day. Just take a minute and think about how easy it is to smile, say hi, and ask how someone is with meaning. We can all be heroes. It's that easy. I'm still going through a lot. I have an awesome wife. I have an awesome life, and I have really good times. I can honestly say that my bucket is empty. I try to help people every day in little ways. Through my short time here on Earth, I've learned some really good lessons. First and most important, I've learned that I am a good person. Also, I've learned that life is not always fun. Life is not always easy. At some point, with help from others, I learned to embrace life on life's terms. I learned that every day is a gift. It's not a guarantee. So I live each day to the fullest, and I'm trying to be thankful and choose to love the people that come into my life for their strength, and I forgive them for their shortcomings. That was a big step for me to make. In closing, I would just like to say, if you ever feel that by sharing my story, part of my story, or by giving out my name and phone number to someone in need may help, do not hesitate. That's part of what I do to get peace with myself. It is through service to others that I have found my peace. So that's it for me. Thanks very much. And I look forward, I've got 1 minute and 30 seconds and I can answer any questions quickly. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Joe George. I know you can't see everyone's reactions because we're all muted, but picture us all virtually clapping. Thank you very much for sharing your story with us. If you have any questions for Joe, you can type them in the comments or you can type them in the text box, and we'll have a question period at the end. And for our second speaker is Lieutenant Colonel Dale Childs, who joined the Canadian Armed Forces in 1993 as an armor officer and has been the commanding officer of the 5th Canadian Division Support Group Personnel Support Services since June 2018. He's the chairperson of the Gagetown Mission Ready Committee and works closely with both the New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island Military Family Resource Centers. Dale lives in Ormocto with his beautiful wife, Wendy, and their amazing son, Sam. He spends every minute he can with his family and remains incredibly grateful for their continued support. So I'll leave it to Dale now.
Okay, are you guys hearing me okay?
Sir, we can hear you. We can't see your video.
Yeah, it is not letting me use the webcam.
That's okay. We can hear you fine.
And you know what? That might be better for me. I don't think anybody needs to look at my mug this early in the morning for any protracted period of time. So, okay, so I'll just get going. First off, thanks everybody for joining today. Like they said, my name's Lieutenant Colonel Dale Childs. I'm the CO for Support Services. I've been in the military for almost 28 years now. Like my bio says, I'm married to my beautiful wife, and we have a little guy, Sam. So go Team Sam. My goal here today is to share some of my experiences and hope that you might find parts of it or all of it useful. I've been worried about the use of humor, but all joking aside, I know there's not a lot of sympathy for the plight of a lieutenant colonel, but I think it's important that we do this, that we talk about mental health, like they advocate as part of Bell Let's Talk, and sharing the story might be is part of that. Before I go too much farther, I do want to thank Warren George for sharing the story. Every time I have an interaction with Warren George, I learn something new. Even from like the casual quick conversations we have in the parking lot over by the chapels. I walk away with another perspective or an appreciation, and sometimes they're not comfortable, but that means that they're good. I'm going to try to follow his example and tell a good story. Unfortunately, it's a story about myself, which is not a topic I really like talking about, and I definitely don't like doing this publicly. So I guess I'm gonna, bear with me. We'll see how this goes. To cut right to it, I had a breakdown about 1.5 years ago, and there was no one event that really led to it. I think it was really an accumulation of a lot of things, really over my whole career that kind of built up. And for those who know him, Malcolm Angus, he works over at the CCMS. He has a really good analogy. I'm gonna shamelessly steal here about unresolved problems. He talks about it like it's a rock in the rucksack, and if you don't fix something, you end up just picking it up and putting it in your rucksack and having to carry it going forward. So obviously, what happened one day is I tried to take a step forward, and I ended up doing a face plant, and I was obviously no longer able to carry the weight of what I'd accumulated. And I think that's in large part because I waited too long to get help. All the warning signs were there, and I dutifully ignored them. Now, with help, I over the last year and a bit, I've been able to figure out, kind of piece it together and figure out what happened to me, and I guess in an effort to try to fix it. And to really dumb it down to something simple, is that there's a disconnect between my expectations and what I've been experiencing in the military. And to be clear here, I'm not talking about my ambitions or hopes or dreams or the posting I want or the course that I'm looking for. I mean that my sense of right and wrong has repeatedly proven incompatible with what I'm seeing in the military. Now, I don't think I have any radical ideas or thoughts. I think my sense of right and wrong is pretty normal, if you can call it that. And I think it also corresponds completely to what we claim to value in the military. Duty, honor, service before self, loyalty, doing the right thing. Like these are the simple things that I believe in, but I wasn't always seeing that in practice, which again, I found a little bit disorienting, a little bit confusing. The term that I guess, and I'm running the risk here, I'm not a clinician, so take what I say with a grain of salt. But the term for this disconnect is moral injury. So my sense of right and wrong was compromised. And it's normal for people that suffer moral injury to feel a deep sense of shame or guilt, as well as a sense of anger and betrayal. There's a lot that's not known about it. For those who are maybe watching the news before Christmas, the federal government has announced that we're going to put a lot of time and energy and money into researching this to understand it a lot better. Some of the emerging research that comes out of the States is that a lot of people they thought may have been, a lot of military people that were diagnosed with PTSD may actually be suffering from moral injuries, which was in part explaining why they were having such a hard time with some PTSD treatment. And there's also a lot of emerging research, especially in the medical community, about healthcare workers, where they're confusing burnout with moral injury. So so it's not just a military problem. It's not just related to combat. It's actually something a little bit more bigger than that. And again, not fully understood, but people are trying to understand it a little bit better. If anybody is interested in learning a little bit more, I would recommend that you go online to the American Veterans Affairs site. They have a lot of good articles about it that will explain it better than I ever could. But all that aside, I think what would be easier is I'll give you a couple examples of kind of what I went through to show you the disconnect. And these isn't really the highlight reel. I just tried to find a couple examples I thought that would make the most sense to everybody, that maybe resonate the most with the audience, with you guys out there today. So the first place to start is probably training. What I learned, now keeping in mind this is almost 30 years ago, right? But what I learned in the training system was that success was largely based on your ability to endure. So it had less to do about skill and more to do about tolerance. If you acted the right way and can put up with the abuse of the instructors, then you made it through. Their goal wasn't necessarily to train you. It was more like to take some rage out on you a little bit. So it was not an overly fun environment. And before going on with the rest of it, I do have to point out that I think we've come a long way in improving how we do training today. I think the training system we have today is much better, much more focused on the goal, training people. But I bet you that, especially those of you who are in and have worn a uniform, I think you've probably seen the echoes of what I just mentioned. Or you went through it yourself, and that's how you were trained, or you've seen what's left over of this kind of perpetuated through the system. One great example I like to bring up, one of the more enticing examples, is that one of my summers of training ended in a massive military police investigation and a couple of court-martials. So a couple of former students were actually drummed out of the military for abusing a course mate. And what I remember, well, even now, but definitely at the time, was my sense of surprise. I wasn't as surprised by the abuse. That part was normal. I was surprised that anybody had done anything about it. That was the part I never quite understood, is that why did the stuff that was happening all the time suddenly warrant this specific attention? And I think it had a large part to do with the fact that the victim in this case, he'd only been in the military for about 6 months. So like he knew this was not right, and was able to lodge a complaint, and the police took it seriously, as they should have. But it just showed you, I think, how far we've been indoctrinated, how our sense of right and wrong had kind of been compromised, if you will. But hey, you took it, you packaged it up. It was another rock. It went in the rucksack. Just as a kind of a quick tangent here, I just wanted to talk quickly about young people we're bringing in the military today. So my RSM and I, we, over the last couple of years, we go over and do the closing remarks at Respect in the CAF courses. And we get a chance to interact with all the students, and especially the junior NCMs when they do their serial. And I got to tell you, and again, the youth of today, the youth in the military, our new members have really impressed us every single time with their clear sense of right and wrong. Like it's clear to them what right and wrong is, and how they should act. But that's not the issue. The issue is that we're bringing them into a culture that has its own flaws. I think that in the future, we're going to be really well served by their clarity and their courage, so long as we encourage them. So for all the leaders out there, for all the managers out there, when these people have the guts to speak up, take notice and help them, protect them, mentor them, encourage them, because I got to tell you, when I look back, these people today are expected to have to be more accountable than Officer Cadet Childs ever was, and to show more guts than Officer Cadet Childs ever had to show. All I had to do was shut up and take it. They actually are expected to do something about it. So we need to encourage and protect them going forward. So getting back to the story. So training ends. Like finally the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm going to get out away from the shenanigans of the training system. I'm going to start the job that I actually joined like 8 years earlier to do. I'm going to start doing that in real time. But what I was finding that things really didn't get a hell of a lot better. It wasn't happening all the time, but every once in a while you were coming across something that I'm fairly certain a reasonable person would have considered was wrong. And those few times that I worked up the courage to either gripe about it or speak up about it, I was shut down pretty quick. People went out of their way to tell me that how wrong I was, how I didn't understand, how I didn't get how things worked. The conclusion for me was pretty simple. I have a problem. It's my problem. I'm too naive to understand. I've got a weird sense of how things are supposed to work. I need to grow up and adapt to the way things are. And again, a few more rocks in the rucksack. All that though, kind of that perspective really got challenged by Afghanistan. And it wasn't really my tour so much, or my experiences, although that was part of it. Really, it was after I got back. So I would find myself in conversations with friends and superiors and peers and comrades and people on other tours than mine. And inevitably, some of these people would start sharing stories about their experiences, their personal stories about something that happened to them or things that had happened to them. And these weren't the funny, like day in the life of the tour or that weird, unbelievable thing that happened. These were really, really intensely personal stories. And they all shockingly had the exact same traits. First, the person telling the story was angry. And I don't mean mad, like I don't mean upset. I mean, they were full of hate. They were full of rage. They felt betrayed by what they had witnessed. And they all had the same focus for that rage. And that's the part that that really took me off guard. So some of these guys had lost troops, they'd lost friends, some of them had lost limbs in combat. I would have expected them to be, and I think anybody would expect them to be angry with the Taliban or the insurgents or the Afghans themselves, or you know what, maybe even themselves. Like maybe they're carrying a bit of guilt over what had happened. But instead, they were all universally angry with a leader. They believed intensely, like in their bones, that through some action or inaction, their leader had betrayed them. Not just disagreed with them, not just like they provided a recommendation, the boss went a different way, but had betrayed them personally and everything that they stood for. And that was a bit of a wake-up call for me because I started to realize that I'm not the fringe candidate anymore. I'm not the person who has the skewed view of reality. Others are seeing this too. And what it really brought my attention to is that the problems that we had every day over here, when we brought them under the heat and light and pressure of Afghanistan, they blew up and got worse. So that's a pretty big realization. And what did I do with it? This epiphany, this life-changing realization. I didn't do anything with it. I didn't know what do you do with that? What do you do when you're confronted with that? And I suppose there are options. And looking back, I try to figure it out, but I have no clue what they were. So I packed it in my rucksack. I put it away. And hey, I allowed myself to get distracted. Life was good. I had good jobs. I was enjoying work. I had a new little guy at home. I got promoted. Eventually, I got command. Like everything that I was aspiring for my whole career was coming to fruition. So it made it easy to distract myself and to ignore the problems. But the rucksack was still there. The weight was still in it. And I was just, I was upbeat and happy. So it was easier to carry the weight. You're in a good mood. I can't tell you in the time since, and even to today, how many times I've tried to talk myself out of these conclusions that I've drawn. Because it would be a lot easier for me to think that I'm wrong, that I'm somehow misunderstanding still, or misremembering, or misinterpreting the situation as it happened. It would be easier for me to believe that I am faulty and broken, and that the military is a finely tuned machine, and I'm dragging them down. And I got to tell you, the relief that would come from being convinced of that would be amazing, because then I would know, right? I'm wrong, I'm broken, I'm faulty, and everything else is fine, and therefore I need to go away and fix myself. And take the uniform off. I don't belong here, right? But I don't think that's the case. So that's the challenge here, is that there's too many instances, there's too much data to be casually ignored. To me, the best example that really comes up is Op Honor. And listen, everybody's got a view about Op Honor and what it represents, and they have a feeling about it. And but I'll tell you one thing that resonates especially for me with Op Honor, and that's the subtext that we can't be trusted to police ourselves. So everything that's in Op Honor, we had in policy before. We weren't supposed to be, engaged in sexual misconduct before. We weren't supposed to be treating anybody with disrespect before. We weren't supposed to be harassing people before. All that before Op Honor, but they still needed the operation all the same. And you could see from the initial reporting, the way that everything rocketed right up to the top, and decisions were made overnight about what happened to people. You can see that really what they were reacting to is the fact that not only did we have sexualized culture ingrained in us, but that we really couldn't be trusted to root it out. That if left to our own devices, we would find ways not to apply the rules that Op Honor represented. That we would look the other way when it was somebody we wanted to protect or advantage or take care of, or someone that was important to us. We didn't want to see them get in trouble, so we would find a way to look the other way. And I know this because that was our culture. I probably shouldn't name names, but I remember in Afghanistan when I was there when General Menard got fired. What he got fired for was stuff that we knew, every people knew was part of his personality. There was no real surprises there, except that he got caught and something was done about it. That tells you where we were. That tells you the magnitude of the problem we have. That this was a repeat, these were repeat offenders in some cases, that others would step in and protect them because of where they were going or what their rank was. The same people that would have no problem, jumping on some poor corporal who stepped out of line. So that's one of the things I recognize about Op Honor and appreciate about Op Honor, is that it's the first rule that I can put hand on heart and say is universally applied to everybody equally. Yeah. So there you go. So a year and a half I broke. I had enough fortitude to go get some help. And I feel like I need to leave you with some advice here. The first bit of advice I would offer to everybody is don't be a Dale. Get help. Get help before you break, before the weight of what you're carrying crushes you. And if you're not sure where to start with the people that are closest to you. They may see the need for you to get help long before you do. They may see it more clearly than you do. And you know what? If they do speak up, listen to them. And I know that's hard, but if they have the guts to speak up, it's because they care about you. Let them help you. And listen, I fought it. I swore I would never ever need help, that I would take care of this myself. And that was I don't even know what you call it, a lie, or it was wrong. At every turn, when I had a misstep and would have a little bit of an episode, or would funnel into this fit of rage or frustration, my wife was there patiently every time telling me I needed help. And I was there like clockwork, like arguing with her every single time. So she sat there patiently and watched me get worse. And as anyone who's married can attest to, my wife was completely right and I was completely wrong. So, and I'm paying for taking so long to seek treatment. Like I'm paying a cost for that. And getting help's hard. And it could be the hardest thing you ever do. And even, even Warren George mentioned the same thing. It is not, it's not easy. It may not be the solution you think it's going to, you want it to be, but it's absolutely necessary. And I know this same kind of topic comes up every year, but it's natural at this point that everybody gets worried about the impacts of a mental health challenge on their job and your career, and what is it going to mean for your next bound or, your ambition. And I'm here to tell you that none of those things matter, not compared to your mental health. Seeking mental health may force you to make some hard choices about your future. It may force you to make choices about whether or not you can continue to serve or how you serve. And it certainly did that to me. It forced me to set boundaries and limits, but I got to tell you something. It helped me establish priorities, and that has been liberating. I have absolutely zero doubt about what is important in my life. I know exactly who I am here to take care of and why I need to take care of them and how important it is to me, and everything else is second. And that clarity is liberating. If that clarity means at some point becomes incompatible with my service, then the service will go, because I have no doubts where I want to focus my full energies. And if that means that I have to make a choice between my mental health and my continued service, I will gladly turn in the uniforms right away. Because again, this is the long game. This is your life, and we shouldn't be passing over your own health for things that, in the grand scheme of things, are completely insignificant. So I hope that in this that there's been something that has been helpful to you. The biggest thing I would encourage everyone to do is to talk. That's what Let's Talk is all about. We want to encourage that dialogue. We want to encourage people to speak up. We want to encourage people to get help if they feel they need help, and where you can, try to be that help for others. Try to be the person like Warren George and the officer he met out at PV. Be that person that even through the smallest acts can make a difference for somebody else and potentially drastically change the trajectory of their life, could drastically impact the quality of their mental health. Take care of each other. That's about it for me, I think. I do have one parting shot. So in the news today, on CBC online, there was a good article that was put out about some recent research about mental health. And as you can imagine, on CTV and CBC today, because of Bell Let's Talk, there's going to be a lot of talk about mental health. So, I encourage people to have a look at those articles and to think a bit about it. What I found especially noteworthy with that article was the demographic they were addressing, and specifically young men. And knowing that we're on a base that is filled with young men, especially going through the training system, it kind of resonates with us about their need for help, the same unwillingness that I just demonstrated that they seem to carry with them, but also the need for help that they carry as well. So again, thank you very much for this opportunity to talk. I hope that this was of use to somebody out there, and I'll stand by for the questions at the end. Thanks very much.
Perfect. Thank you very much for sharing your story, Lieutenant Colonel Childs. And thank you very much for being a champion for respect in the CAF and Operation Honor. We really appreciate it. And now we'll hear from our third and final speaker. Diana Brown is a licensed psychologist at 42 Health Services. She has been working in the mental health field for the past 12 years, joining the team here in 2016. In addition to her work at the clinic, she provides mental resiliency training for firefighters and police officers. She was involved with CHIMO Helpline for a number of years and enjoys working within the community and for members of the CAF.
Right. Hello. Thank you for having me here and for joining me from your respective bubbles. I'm going to be talking about our mental health and the pandemic. We've all had different experiences with this, but I think that the one thing that's true for all of us is change. Our lives have changed, the world's changed, and change takes a toll on all of us. Even positive changes do. Things like buying a new house or getting a promotion. Anytime our lives change, that translates to stress on us as we adjust. Sometimes we just ride along with it, and sometimes we need to take an active part in working through it. This past year's turned into a marathon when I think a lot of us didn't even expect it to reach our doors. When you think about it, we've been dealing with this longer than the length of an average tour. So while the changes may have been different for everyone, they've had an effect on everyone. Mental health and coping have kind of come to the forefront of a lot of our conversations in the past year. We might find it harder to cope through things that in the past didn't bother us at all, or the opposite. Things that bothered us in the past now seem minor. Our normal, both in our lives and in our view of the world around us, have changed pretty drastically. So we're relying more heavily on our coping mechanisms right now. Now, a lot of people might think mental health doesn't relate to them, that it's just something that happens to other people. But mental health is an important thing for everyone to consider. You've got it, whether you acknowledge it or not. It's like how we all have physical health. Sometimes it's going well, sometimes we get sick or break an arm or something. No one's able to completely avoid ups and downs with our physical health. Mental health is the same. And with both, the more you take care of yourself, the better outcomes you tend to get. There are 3 parts to taking care of ourselves: awareness, resources, and maintenance. I think the key to most of this is actually awareness, checking in with ourselves to see how we're doing. Sometimes we get so used to treading water that as long as we're mostly keeping our heads above the surface, we think we're doing okay. Or we compare ourselves to others and think we should just appreciate where we're at. But the truth is, if you feel distress, you deserve to take care of it. So let's talk about building awareness. Much of our society allows us to avoid. We can zone out with TV, video games, exercise, work, scrolling through our phones, and more. Doesn't mean that those are bad things, but when we spend most of our time zoned out, we can kind of lose touch with ourselves and awareness of how we're doing until we find ourselves alone and quiet for a moment. Maybe when you're trying to get to sleep at night, maybe when you're alone at home due to a shutdown of society. Maybe it's old stuff that's coming up, stuff you might have forgotten was there, or maybe it's new stuff, worries about the state of the world or things currently going on in your life. Try asking yourself right now, how am I doing? How do you figure that out? If you're able to keep up with your day-to-day tasks and stuff that you're supposed to be doing, you might say that you're doing fine, even if you're exhausted or feeling like you're going under. Or you may have one area of your life that's stressful and it takes up so much of your attention that you don't think about anything else going on. One thing I find helpful is just a quick check-in tool. You rate your distress level on a scale of 0 to 10. 0 means no distress or neutral. 10 means the most distress you can possibly imagine. Some of you might have taken the Road to Mental Readiness or R2MR before, and it teaches a similar scale, only it uses colors: green, yellow, orange, red, and they correspond. It's the same thing, so you use what works for you. I just use the 0 to 10 scale a little bit more. So on that 0 to 10 scale, when you're at a 0, your breathing's normal, your heart rate's calm, you're feeling rested, able to think clearly, and can manage whatever is going on without concern. The opposite end of that, 10, would be feeling like you're going under, noticing physical symptoms like shakiness, difficulty breathing, body tension, and increased heart rate. Your thoughts are racing, it's hard to think clearly, you want to run away or feel like you might explode. This is where you can really start to see how your physical and mental health are intertwined. Now, I hear people say all the time when they get really angry that they go from 0 to 10 and nothing, but that almost never happens. We think we're at a 0 because we're keeping our head above water. But if you didn't get a good night's sleep last night, or maybe you haven't eaten yet today, you might actually already be up on that scale a little bit. You're still able to cope, but you're not working with like your full bucket of resources. And maybe you're also stressing about something in the back of your mind, like a fight you had with your spouse or a situation at work. And so now you're starting off at a level 5 or a 6 on that scale instead. Now imagine you're driving along the highway and someone cuts you off. That just shoots you right up to a level 8 or 9, maybe even 10. But you didn't really go from a 0 to 10. You already had stuff that was going on and that was weighing on you. That's why it's important to be aware of what you've got weighing you down. Right now, the changes you're experiencing from the pandemic might be part of that weight you're carrying. Change weighs on us. So try to notice how you feel throughout the day at different times, just to build that awareness of how you're doing. Check in with yourself, like when you first wake up in the morning, after you've had a good meal or done something you really enjoy, or after something stresses you out, maybe before you go to sleep at night. It just allows you to get more in touch with yourself so you can start to take care of things as needed. If you do regular checks on yourself, you have more opportunity to take care of that stuff. And you already do that in other areas of your life. You do regular checks and maintenance on things like your vehicles. So we need to do the same thing with ourselves. And you don't have to be perfect. We're all works in progress, and we always will be. We're learning, changing, growing, and if we're in distress, that deserves to be looked at. Because the longer we try to push that stuff down, the more it kind of festers, and then the harder it is to take care of. So that brings me to my next point, and I've already mentioned it a couple of times: resources, how we take care of things. Resources are abilities and tools that we've built up over time. The things we use to maintain our physical and mental health, and they're the things we use to cope through difficult times. They're really a big part of your resilience. Resources are things like eating healthy and getting an appropriate amount of sleep, being hydrated, exercising, having time for yourself to check in, or doing things you enjoy doing. It's spending time with people you care about and connect with, problem solving, taking care of issues as they come up, whether that's working through conflict with a spouse or coworker, balancing a budget, going to the dentist when you have a toothache. Things that sit on your plate too long often just get worse. And when it comes right down to it, you are your best resource. When you check in with yourself and you're noticing things are getting a bit off track, you can ask yourself, how am I taking care of myself right now? Am I eating well? Am I sleeping an appropriate amount, drinking enough water, getting some time for exercise, connecting with people in some way? Is there something weighing on my mental load that I need to action? Start with you, because your ability to take care of you first is the most important thing. But we need something more than just our own resources. We're human and we need each other. And sometimes we haven't had a chance to build our abilities or resources yet, and we don't know how to take care of a certain situation. That's okay too. That's when we reach out to our support system, our friends and family who can be our sounding boards for problem solving or give us some helpful advice. And even after that, we got another layer of resources, people who are experts in areas we need help with. People like physicians, therapists, dentists, people to help us with specific areas that we need to focus on. Even now in COVID, resources are there. They might have changed the format, but they're there. So places like CIFMAP, 42 health services, workshops that are offered, addictions recovery groups. Outside of that, there's CHIMO Helpline and other community resources available. When in doubt, you can always call 211 to be connected with local resources. So think about it as we've got ourselves as our first resource. Then we've got our loved ones and our support system just outside of that. And then we've got professionals and outside help beyond that. We really need all of these. And all around this, we have our regular day-to-day stuff that we do. That's our maintenance. The stuff we've already talked about that we want to check in with to notice how we're doing, our healthy habits. So I can kind of give an example of this stuff just in terms of how you take care of your vehicle. You have your checks and your maintenance you do regularly. You fill it up with gas. You make sure everything's working okay. Sometimes something might go wrong with it and you get a buddy over to help fix it. Other times something bigger might go wrong and you gotta take it into a shop to have it taken care of. But you know, we need to take care of it because if you ignore a flat tire, it's not gonna fix itself. And if you try to keep pushing through, it's probably gonna do more damage to your car. That same process can be tied to your overall mental health, just by starting to build awareness around it and regular resources for maintenance. And with our current challenges that we're facing, that's more important now than ever. COVID's prompted us to increase our self-care. Most of us can cope in the short term. Long term's different. We get tired and worn down, but we don't have to ignore that or soldier on. Building your awareness and your abilities will help you now and give you skills long term too. In order to make lasting changes, we need to treat every day like it's a let's talk day. You can start doing that right now. So instead of brushing stuff off when someone asks us what's wrong, we can say something like, I'm just having a rough day. Or if you see someone else not acting like themselves, you can just let them know you're up for a chat. You can make sure that you're eating decently, getting enough sleep, doing things you enjoy doing, having some downtime, connecting with other people. Resilience is something that we maintain. It's not something we achieve. A little bit of maintenance regularly is way easier than a major overhaul later on. So if you're struggling right now, that's okay. It doesn't mean you're weak or broken. It means that something needs to be taken care of. Part of that will be your resources that you have and can build on. Part of that's the support and connection with other people around you. Resiliency is not a fixed trait that some people have and some people don't. It requires the willingness to try basic strategies, even though it's hard, reaching out, even though it's hard. So I'm going to leave you with some a kind of a page of resources. I can put this on. Hello. All right. Okay. So this is kind of a list of some resources that are available. There's lots more beyond that. There are still groups running. We're still here at 42 Health Services. There's also other workshops available, even online. There's always something or someone. So if I'll send this to the organizers if they want to post that somewhere too, and add to those resources. So that is it for me. Thank you so much for having me today, and good luck with everything in your future.
Thank you very much, Diana Brown, for giving us some very interesting information and some very important information. We'll now open the floor to audience questions. Make sure you keep your microphones off and leave your questions in the question box. If your question is for a specific person, please indicate it. C'est maintenant le temps pour les questions. Un rappel de taper vos questions dans la boîte et s'il vous plaît, indiquez si votre question est dirigée à une personne en particulier ou au panel au complet. Merci. So I'll start the floor with a question. I have a question for Joe George. So how can people learn more about addictions, and how can you help someone who's struggling?
Okay, thanks for the question. So if someone has addictions, first of all, that's two questions. If someone has addictions, what you can do is you can get them to help. So you can bring them to the MIR, and actually the health promotions model, Ask, Care, Escort, works very well. So bring them to the MIR, and they can go in and get a referral there for mental health or addictions. And then supporting them is just it's a very thin line. And so part of my story, because I had this pare it down to make it fit, there's a lot in there about enabling, and it's very easy to cross over into enabling while you're trying to support. So it's a very thin line. One of the best things that we can do, that I can do, is I take the courses from health promotions and start to learn more. So knowledge is a powerful thing. A lot of the problems in addictions or in mental health all stem from just ignorance of the facts. So just these free courses we can take, and promoting, if you're a leader, promoting your people, taking these courses from health promotions. Another important resource, which I'd like to hear from today, is the Padres. The Padre system we have is amazing for support. Spiritual is a big part of the emotional, and mental health. So I don't know if that answered it for you. Did it?
Yeah, I did. Thank you.
Okay.
And so for our second question, the question is for Dale Childs. So what advice do you have for family members watching someone they love struggling with a mental health issue?
Okay, you hear me all right? Okay, great.
Yeah.
So it's funny, my wife just walked out of the room. She would be the better one to answer this. But I would say be patient. Be patient and be persistent. And maybe I'll throw some gender into this. If you're dealing with a man who is suffering, understand how pig-headed and belligerent they're going to be when you try to offer them help. And that the research is showing that the majority of men, when confronting mental health issues, are under the misconception that they can deal with it all by themselves, and they can manage the problem themselves. And as a direct result of that, they're having a disproportionate number of incidents. So be patient and be persistent, and be helpful. Eventually, I want to believe that they're going to come around to see reason. I hope everybody has as great a spouse as I have. That it pains me that she's right sometimes, but she is right, and it got me the help that I needed.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And so my third question that I have here is for Diana Brown. Can you walk us through what someone can expect when they go to mental health? Example, where they go, who they'll talk to, and what are some treatment options?
Sure. So most of the time they come to us through their by going to the MIR, either through a meeting with their primary care clinician or attending sick parade. So they might go to intake and talk with our someone that we have there. And what they'll do is kind of go through an assessment, try to figure out what their needs are when they're identified as needing to come for some sort of mental health. They'll be assigned to a clinician that seems most appropriate for whatever situation they're struggling with. And then they'll be hooked up with one of us. So once they're hooked up with their therapist, it's a collaborative approach. We talk about kind of where they want to go with their therapy, kind of what the struggles have been, what they've been coping with so far. And there's a lot of different evidence-based therapies that we use to help them reach those goals. So a lot of the work really is what happens after that between sessions. So you've got this team approach, your therapist, probably your primary care clinician that you're meeting with. Sometimes we involve psychiatrists for diagnosis or medications. We've got wonderful social workers, mental health nurses, and psychologists. We have a great team that just tries to work together to help people identify what they need and how to get there. Does that kind of answer it?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you very much. Perfect. So my next question that I have is for Joe George again. So what is enabling when it comes to addictions?
So again, definitions are more the clinical side of the house. So I'll give you an example of my history and how I inadvertently enabled my son, and maybe that'll, from my side, that'll clear it up. When Sam started using, he was using fentanyl and crystal meth and coke and things like that. And being the father, immediately I gave him crap, and said, this is crazy, I'm going to have to ground you. And obviously he was too old to ground by then. And so then his drug dealer, he said, you gotta help me. I need money. My drug dealer said he's going to kill me if I don't pay the bill. And so I had a very stern talk with him, and then messaged the drug dealer and said, I'll find you if you ever do this again. And I paid for the drugs. And the drug dealer said, yes, sir. And, then immediately started selling Sam drugs again, because that's what drug dealers do. And then Sam was selling everything he had, everything he owned, laptops, furniture, even some stuff he didn't own, and he couldn't make his rent. And I would pay his rent, which was great because I didn't want to see him freeze. But what he'd do is he'd then take the money that he would have spent saving up for rent and buy more drugs and, and food and even grocery cards and things like that. So that was my bout with enabling. And I felt really horrible because as an addict myself, you would think I would know better, and I just had no clue. So enabling is kind of letting love get in the way of common sense. Is kind of my thoughts on that. So I know that's not the clinical side, but that's sort of my take on it. Okay.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. Perfect. So just to let everybody know, in case you don't know, to ask questions, the little chat box is the second or the third button on the top. It kind of looks like a little speech bubble. And then that's where you can type in your questions if anybody has any. But in the meantime, I do have another question for Dale Childs. So as a leader or a peer, how can you start the conversation when you can see that someone's struggling and they might not recognize it themselves?
I guess I would reduce it to something as simple as you just simply need to speak up and put it out there. So I know I've had this conversation with others where I can tell that they're in trouble, or that I can tell that they're suffering. I don't know that they're in trouble yet. And you just simply have to tell them, you just have to simply state the obvious, that you can tell that they're suffering, that something is going on, and that you're available to help. I wish there was something more, I wish there was a more magic solution that would immediately link them up with help. I mean, obviously you do the same things. You refer them where you're able to. You encourage them to go seek a little bit more professional advice, obviously depending on the nature of the problem. And more importantly, you just encourage people to speak about it and stop what you're doing and talk about it. And again, I guess the best example we've already heard is Warren George. Take 5 minutes, take 15 minutes while you're walking across the compound at PV to stop and ask somebody how they're doing, and mean it. As a leader, we're supposed to be taking care of our people. We're supposed to know our people. So the best way to demonstrate that is to really invest in their lives and what they're doing and what they're all about, and know them better, because that relationship will also help them when it comes time. When they do have to take a knee, or when they do need a little more elaborate help, it will allow them to step forward and get that help that they need.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So there is actually a question in the chat box here. So it's for Warrant Officer Joe George. So it says, your story is so important to hear, so thank you. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on drinking the 0.5% beverages. For you, did you find that they were more of a risk in your decision to quit drinking? I know these types of drinks are often seen as an option for many who struggle.
Yeah, so big thing there is for me, okay? So that, I think, that has to be one of the most important things that you take away from my answer, is that this is for me. I can only speak for me. But for me, so alcoholism is not a disease of drinking. It's a disease of the mind and a disease of thinking. And however I tried to fool myself, I always caught up to myself. So whether I drank 0.5 and tried to admit that it was or tried to reason with myself and say that this was doing good for me, it didn't matter. Some people, myself included, in some of my lowest days, were drinking stuff other than bottled booze. So there's things like, and we laugh about it, and I laugh about it, but it's a fact. There's good, there's Listerine, there's things like with alcohol in them. It just doesn't matter. The label on the can or on the bottle really doesn't matter. It's the thinking that really, the alcohol is just the outward sign of an inward problem. So is that an answer for you?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. And so now I'm going to open the floor to any of the presenters if they want to add anything, or if they want to ask any questions. Yeah, so if any of the presenters want to ask anything, feel free.
Actually, I can't contain myself. I have no self-control. So, sorry, so Jennifer Childs. Listen, thanks everybody for showing up today. So, the event is the event, but the real power here is your interest in this topic and your ability to go back and make an impact at work, make an impact at home, and to encourage this kind of dialogue and to fight the stigmas that we see every day. So thanks everybody for attending. And I guess my challenge to you is that, go forth and be the champion for mental health here in our community. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And so now I guess we'll open the floor for anybody that wants to unmute their mic and ask a question that way, if it's easier than typing it out. So if you want to ask a question, this will be the last call for questions. So you can unmute your mic and ask your questions that way, if that's easier. Okay, so if nobody has any other questions, then I will open up the floor to Major Michael McDonald for the closing remarks.
Hi there. Can you see me okay? We're coming through? Okay. So my name's Major Michael McDonald. I'm a psychiatrist working at the mental health clinic for 42 Health Services. I'm the clinical leader, so kind of providing clinical oversight of what happens at the mental health clinic, and work closely with the clinicians here, and work closely with the program manager, Lieutenant Navy Dale Vincent, who's also on the line, and we're here to coordinate and ensure services are delivered to the members here on base. I think we have a lot of great services, and we're working very diligently to provide care. So I've been asked to kind of provide some closing remarks for today, and I'd like to, I guess, start by thanking Warren George and Lieutenant Colonel Childs for, and I know it's been said, but for sharing their stories. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of courage to be vulnerable in a forum like this, especially when you don't get a lot of feedback. With a live audience, you get a lot more feedback. But I do thank them for sharing their stories. I think I hope them sharing will help those in the audience know that it's, there's people that struggle, that in different positions that have had struggles and have. I think it's important to see that they've overcome a lot of those. Are in the process and still overcoming these challenges, and I hope that provides hope, but also allows people to reach out for help. I'd like to thank Diana for her talk. I know last night I was thinking of what I would say, and I think I'm glad I didn't go with some of the thoughts, because you covered those so well. Did a much better job than I could ever cover. I think you've hit on important things like awareness, knowing your resources, knowing, and trying to maintain mental health. So I really encourage those in the audience to incorporate those principles into your daily lives. I'd say for a lot of our services day to day focused on people that are kind of already struggling. They're kind of past the point of maybe being able to just do some preventative maintenance, but it is an important thing. And if anybody, chains of command, would like to have one of our clinicians come and give a talk to your staff, to your subordinates, we are more than happy to do that. We have clinicians that would love to get out and talk about different things that people can do to kind of do that maintenance, and practice more preventative things. So please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Lieutenant Navy Dale Vincent, and we can certainly try and arrange that. I think the question that everybody did an excellent job answering the questions that were asked. I would highlight the importance or the prominent role that primary care clinicians are going to play in managing mental health. Not everything needs to come to the mental health clinic. There's again lots of resources along the way, and so please don't hesitate to talk to your family, your nurse practitioner, your MO, your PA, about your mental health. They've got lots of ways and that they can help as well. So I'd like to just leave with two final points. We've talked a lot about everybody looking and talking and not being afraid to express themselves. I'd like to hint to just kind of part of talking is having someone listen, and so I'd like to speak to the people that are going to listen. we may not, as a listener, you may not understand where, why someone is struggling. And it may seem like it's something that what they're struggling with may seem trivial to you, but I think it's important that we listen without judgment. Everybody has been through, everybody is, so the way someone responds is the result of multiple factors, including genetics, temperament, their past experiences, their current, what they're going through right now in their lives. And so you got to, until you've kind of been through everything that they've gone through in their life and have the same genetics, which is impossible, it may not understand. It may not fully get why they are where they're at. So please, listen without judgment, and be open to kind of understanding where someone's coming from. And if you can't, if you fully can't understand, just don't judge, and make sure that the person gets to the help they need. Finally, I'd like to say that, as important as it is to talk, and that is the first step, we also need to, once we've talked, once we've come forward, we've expressed ourselves, and we've gone to help, we need to act, and we need to, once we've identified the problem, we need to ideally do something about it. Sometimes when we're seeing clients, it takes a while to realize that we're just kind of talking about the problem over and over again, and talking about where people are at, and not necessarily, moving forward. Moving forward may involve change. It may involve changing our outlook, changing our skills, changing our situation. But it's important that we kind of, once you've identified the problem, to try and figure out how to make a change. And there's, again, many resources for that. Sometimes, as mental health clinicians, we see a lot of people with workplace conflict, and people want us to change that, and that may really, we have limited ability to change the environment that you're in, but there are resources out there for that. So Lieutenant Colonel Childs mentioned Malcolm Angus and the Conflict Resolution Center. So that's one resource. If you're being, if there's harassment going on, then you need to pursue that through things like harassment advisors. I think it's just important to realize that those resources are there, and they're going to contribute to the overall. They could contribute to your overall mental health. So don't be afraid to use those. So I think that's all the thoughts I had, and all I wanted to say. I don't know if my colleague, Lieutenant Navy Vincent, wanted to say anything, but I'm going to put him on the spot and see if he wants to say anything. Dale? Okay.
Hi, everyone. So now that I'm on the spot, I'll just say a few words. I would echo Major McDonald's comments and the guest speakers today in terms of thanking everyone for coming, both the participants and the facilitators. As I was listening to each person speak, I took note of many of the common themes that people had, whether it was people with lived experience, the leadership team at the base, and also the clinicians that spoke. So what I would urge people to do is, if you're feeling out of sorts, if something doesn't feel right, to take action early, and then it will prevent the symptoms from becoming worse, and you'll be able to access the services and supports that you require. Almost daily, we get calls from individuals, chains of command, concerned people, and they usually ask us, how do I access support, either for themselves or for someone that they care about, someone within their chain of command. If you find yourself in this situation and you don't have the answers, that's okay. Reach out to one of us, reach out to the Padres, reach out to health services, and we will help guide you through the process. Even if that involves going back to the basics to explain what's going to happen. I'm worried about this. Can someone please talk to me and help me overcome my fears of even starting to discuss some of these issues? I think that's very important to dismiss some of the misconceptions right up front, and we're happy to help with that in an effort to help people come forward in an educated and informed manner, rather than relying on perhaps stories or experiences that might be secondhand and are likely not accurate of what's actually going to happen. So I've noticed this happening more and more. That's an indication that chains of command are informed. They're paying attention to their members, and they're seeing people struggling, and they're taking action on that. Likewise, it doesn't need to be the chain of command. It could be a family member, a friend. And I encourage you to have those conversations at the very beginning. And as Major McDonald said, and Warrant Officer Joe George as well, take that minute or two to check in with someone and offer that support. So I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you, Major McDonald, and thank you for the rest of the speakers today. And feel free to contact us if you have any comments, questions, or concern. We're easily accessible by email or by phone to call Mental Health Services. And if you just have a question or two of a personal nature, of a professional nature, please feel free to do so. We'd be happy to help. Thank you.
Okay, and so with that, I also just want to remind people that Bell is going to donate 5 cents to every mental health initiative for every text, mobile call, long distance call, tweet using the hashtag Bell Let's Talk or Facebook Bell Let's Talk frame or Snapchat filter. And so I just want to thank everybody who attended today. Have a great day, and just remember to continue the conversation, not just today, but every day, to help break down the stigma of mental health. So again, I just want to thank everybody for being here today. And that's it for this morning.